thank Honey because Honey read my book, and the reason why I wrote the book is because I wanted to reach as many people as possible, and I really wanted to reach young people, people your age, and to know that Honey found the book on her own and was moved by it and inspired by it enough to bring me here and look for me is so touching to me, and it just really gives me a lot of gratification. It makes me think, wow, I did something and I touched somebody, which is what I always wanted to do. It was always my intention to touch somebody with my story, because I had been touched by so many other people's stories that I had read when I was in high school and in college. And I thought, if I could do that someday, I would really be honored. So I just really want to thank Honey for bringing me here, for finding me, and for reminding me the beauty of writing and reading. So let's see, how long do I have exactly?
Oh, you have a long time.
Like an hour.
I like to leave time for questions also, because I find that young people especially have a lot of questions. Okay. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I've done a lot of these type of things in lots of different settings. And what I find is at the end, people have a lot of questions for me. So I like to leave a little bit of time for questions. So what I want to do, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, about how I grew up, about what inspired me to want to write the book, and kind of tell you a little bit about the process that it took me to write the book. And then I will leave it open for questions. And, usually people have a lot of questions. If not, I'll just keep talking. Okay, so I started out in New York City, as Honey mentioned. I was born in Brooklyn, an area called Brownsville, which was an extremely dangerous area. It was a very dark place to grow up in. Lots of violence. When I was born, crack was really starting to take a full effect of New York City, especially in minority areas. Crack was really extremely popular, and lots of horrible things were happening in that area at that time. I was born in Brownsville. The most famous person to ever come out of Brownsville is Mike Tyson. He's one of the few quote-unquote heroes that we have of Brownsville. He was very popular. I don't know if any of you have ever seen the documentary, but there's a documentary about Mike Tyson that showed that he actually was involved in some kind of ugly jobs as a youngster in Brownsville. But that's the kind of place it was. I have really disturbing memories of being a kid and seeing horrible acts of violence occurring there, and just being terrified. You know, we lived in an apartment that was full of roaches and mice and stuff like that. My mother was a single mom. She had me when she was 16 years old. She had my sister when she was 18 years old. And I never really knew my father ever. I met him about 2 times. And one time I talk about in great detail in the book. It was a very disturbing time when I met him. And I won't go into detail about that. I'll let you read the book. But it was, my father, I never really knew him. Then he died when I was very young. So we grew up in a lot of this violence. And then actually what happened is that we were burned out of our apartment building in Brownsville. My mother believes that the landlord wanted to get insurance money for the slums that he was running. And so we were burned out of our apartment, and I spent a year actually living in a welfare hotel in Brooklyn. And that was very scary too, because I don't know if any of you have any experience with welfare hotels, but they're not the most clean places. Usually a lot of people are there because they've reached the end of their rope. They're desperate and they need a place to live until they can find housing. This welfare hotel that we lived in was 1 room, and so my sister and I shared a bed, and my mother had her own bed. But there were rats in this place, and I was, to this day, I'm still kind of nervous at the sight of a rat, just because I have all these memories of like waking up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom and like seeing rats scurrying across the floor and stuff like that. And it even got to the point where I would get afraid to go to the bathroom. And so I actually had a problem when I was younger of peeing in the bed for a while because I was afraid to get up and go to the bathroom. Lucky I got over that by the time I reached a decent age. But it wasn't a pleasant place to live, the welfare hotel. We were there for about a year, and then we moved to the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Has anyone here ever been to New York? Okay, lots of people been to New York. Now, if you go to Lower East Side now, where I grew up, it's very different than what I grew up in. Now, because of gentrification, something that I think is happening a lot here in Portland as well, the neighborhood looks almost completely different from what I grew up in. When I grew up in there, the neighborhood, it was all black, Puerto Rican, and Dominican families. It was a pretty violent place. It was funny, I feel like we so often joke, we left one horrible place, and then the fire we hoped would change things and we'd actually go somewhere better, but we actually left one horrible place and moved to another horrible place. But that being said, you know, it's funny. I grew up around, like I said, all black, Puerto Rican, and Dominican. I learned to speak Spanish at a very young age because a lot of my best friends were Puerto Rican and Dominican, so I can hold a decent conversation in Spanish still to this day because of that. You know, despite the fact that it was a very dangerous place, I remember having a lot of wonderful memories in my neighborhood. I remember playing stickball, something I think probably people don't do anymore because there's video games and other stuff. But I remember we didn't have video games. We didn't have cable back then. There was no cable TV, so you had to actually go outside and do stuff. And so I would go outside and play stickball with my friends. I played basketball. I played touch football. I actually was someone who really enjoyed the outdoors and really enjoyed being with my friends. I was an extremely social person, and I was often out. And then something happened. I went to a local school in my neighborhood, and I had a very negative experience with a teacher in my school. And it's kind of funny because now that I look back on it, I think I was a very difficult kid. I had a lot of energy. I was often disruptive in class, and my mother pulled me out of that school because I had a confrontation with a teacher who was trying to get me to behave in class. And now that I look back on it, I actually think, wow, I think that my mother probably did the wrong thing pulling me out of that school, but I think she blamed the teacher for coming down on me. And now being a high school teacher myself and having to deal with kids who were just like me, if not even more energy, I think, wow, you know, that teacher really just wanted me to behave. That teacher wanted me to learn, and she wanted me to behave so that the rest of the class could also learn. And I think I was probably a difficult kid. Although, I don't know, the teacher could have also probably been maybe not the nicest teacher. But I think that my mother probably acted impulsively and pulled me out of the school. But one thing that happened, though, was that she actually